Probably the most common question I get, if I were to use a blanket statement, would be about an injury someone has. So often I receive messages from people frustrated about an injury they've got, a niggle, a pain, and so often I don't really know what to say. I don't have the answers. I'm firstly not a physiotherapist. I'm not working with that individual. And I don't know how you're training, so I don't know what's causing it. There's so much that could be causing it. And so my advice is usually see a physio, and then I may give some generic advice if I have some, or if I ask a couple of questions to that individual, I'll give some advice. But so often, people run into injuries, pun intended, and they don't know what caused the injury. So today, I'm going to do my best to talk to you about the big three causes of running injuries. What I see to be the three most common. In fact, not what I necessarily see to be the three most common causes of running injuries, but what most of the literature agrees on across the board. We will also have a RunBiz segment on this episode. It's with the founder of Sums, Ed Vickers. And if you've not heard of Sums, it's a sock brand. They make the best socks. I did say last week when we had a RunBiz segment with Tailwind that it was the first in a while. And I've got two for you. I did say I'd have two in a row for you. So we've got two in a row. I do say at the start of that RunBiz segment, which I'm very conscious of as I record this, that it's the first we've had in a while. And that is because the recording timings were a little bit confused, and I mistakenly said this is the first RunBiz segment we've had in a while, and it's not. So forgive me there, but it's a great segment. So we'll move on to that after I've had a little bit of a chat with you about the three biggest causes, most common causes of running injuries. Now, I first want to say that I am not claiming cause and effect here. It's not the same for everyone, but they are things worth considering. And I want to highlight the conclusion of a systematic review, and I should find the reference here. And that systematic review you can find in PubMed. And it's about training errors and running related injuries. And the purpose of this review was to examine the link between training characteristics, that is volume, duration, frequency, and intensity, and running related injuries. So they were trying to find connections between these characteristics and certain injuries. And in that systematic review, they found over 4,000 studies and pieces of literature and articles, and they whittled it down to, I think it was 63 articles that they identified as potentially relevant. Finally, they had 9 retrospective cohort studies, 13 prospective cohort studies, 6 case-controlled studies, and 3 RCTs. And the results were that there were conflicting results across the board on the relationship between volume, duration, intensity, and frequency and running-related injuries. And I just want to read you the conclusion here. Basically, what we're seeing is they're doing this full systematic review of a load of studies, trying to find at least correlation and trends between these characteristics, volume, duration, intensity, and frequency, and running-related injuries. They're trying to find what causes these running-related injuries. And their conclusion was, based on the studies reviewed, it was not possible to identify which training errors are related to running-related injuries. Running experience and injury threshold seem to play a role in the relationship between training characteristics and development of injuries, while volume, duration, intensity, and frequency seem to have a complex interaction with each other, which is not accounted for in the majority of the included studies. All training variables should be measured and accounted for when studies on the relationship between training characteristics and injuries are examined in future studies. And the conclusion goes on. So what we're seeing here is that a systematic review has looked into the details, and it is very difficult to find causation when we look at certain characteristics in their training and injuries, because there are so many different variables. All of these characteristics work together like a symphony. And on top of that, every individual is different. You'll see in this systematic review, they talk about the fact that running experience and injury threshold seem to play a key role. So that's based on the individual. And so just simply whittling it down to we can find causes to injuries is not what I'm trying to do here. What I'm trying to do is tell you the 3 things that are most commonly done amongst injured runners. We'll do it in an order of importance. And that is my opinion, I think, the importance of these 3. The first is training load errors. The second is biomechanical issues and weakness. And the third, footwear and surfaces. Before we do get stuck in, a very quick word from, you've heard them before, you're hearing them again. It's Innovate. Innovate have been supporting this podcast from very early on, and they've been supporting me. And recently, I went into the Spanish Pyrenees, and of course my footwear of choice was a pair of Innovates, and they took on the terrain like nothing else. Their grip technology is constantly advancing. They just keep responding to what their people want. And I think recently, one thing I've just really admired in Innovate and what they're trying to communicate is room for the toes. With Innovate shoes, you get a wider toe box. So one of the unique characteristics of Innovate shoes is that it lets your toes splay a little bit more. But that doesn't mean that they're ugly, flipper-looking shoes. They're beautiful-looking shoes, but they just have a little bit more room. They're a bit more foot-shaped. If you've got a big toe, like me, there'll be room for that big toe. And they just fit your foot really nicely. So, if you want to get a pair of Innovates, go to innovate.com, INOV8.com, use the code RUNNABLE for 15% off. You won't regret it. I've been running for a long time and have had my fair share of running-related injuries because I've done all the mistakes. I've made all the mistakes. But the core idea here of this episode is that running injuries, although I don't really like that term, makes running seem like it's the cause of injuries. But running injuries are not bad luck. They follow predictable patterns. We can see what most injured runners, what the causes of those injuries are. We can look at the trends. We can see the common causes. And they are as follows. Now, in this episode, I'm of course not talking about an injury from a fall or a sprained ankle or falling off your bike. I'm not talking about injuries that are caused by something outside of your running. I'm talking about injuries, quote unquote, caused by running. And the first cause for running injuries that we're talking about is training load errors. Now, this is probably the most important. Training load errors. So often I see people doing too much too soon, ramping too quickly, jumping up their mileage, doing back-to-back hard runs, having a severe lack of rest days, doing only high intensity. This will not be sustainable. It is highly likely that if you're diving in head first and not considering how your body is going to be able to deal with the load you're putting on it, you will run into injuries. So, doing too much too soon is intentionally the first thing I'm saying because it is so common. It might be that you have shin splints. It might be that you're dealing with a fracture. Whatever it is. Consider how quickly you went from 0 to 100. Consider how quickly you were not running. You went from not running at all to all of a sudden matching the mileage that someone who's been running for a long time is doing. Whatever the reasons for you doing this, they might be deep-rooted. They might not be, they might be unconscious reasons. It might be that you're seeing others do a lot better than you, or you're seeing others do 20Ks on the weekend, and you want to do that. And so you just go out and do it, because you know you can probably. But consider how your body will react to this. We are not superheroes. We are not robots. We can become very durable. We can become very resilient if we ramp slowly, if we consider our bodies. But if you do too much too soon, if you jump in the mileage, if you do too much intensity, if you make key training load errors, it can be a cause of injury. And is such a common one. Not respecting adaptation cycles. Not respecting adaptation cycles. Your body's tissue needs stress and recovery. It needs both. You need to break it down and rest to build it back up. That's how muscles grow. If you're not respecting these adaptation cycles, if you're not allowing your body to recover, if you're just always going hard, or if you've gone from 0 to really hard sessions within a 2 or 3 week period and you haven't built up slowly, this is a seriously common cause of injuries. Now, you might not think you've ramped that quickly. You might think you're fine. But that's how this happens. That's how these injuries happen. They're not even detectable before they're a problem. And so, even if you're not struggling with any niggle or feeling of weakness somewhere, even if you can't identify that there will be an issue, you must ramp slowly. You must control your load, and you must make sure that you're thinking about how your body is going to react to the stress you put on under it. There was a study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine which talked about injury risk spikes when load increases. But there's this interesting kind of workload ratio that they try and assess. And in that study, there was, I seem to remember there was something about how individuals who have normally have a high workload are at a lower risk of injury. But those who usually have a low workload and have these occasional spikes, they're at a much higher risk of injury. And so when we think about workload, there is no amount of volume that is too much. There is no amount of intensity that is too much. It almost always is about how quickly you're ramping, how much you're spiking from nothing to something. It's all about the context. There are runners out there who can do 100-mile weeks, week on week on week on week. The reason they're able to do that, one of the reasons they're able to do that, is because they've been doing it for so long. They've ramped up. They're a very seasoned runner. They've been doing this stuff for a very long time, consistently. You need patience with your running. You need patience. And you need patience in life. This is one of my favorite life lessons from running, is that nothing happens overnight. You need patience. You need consistency, not reckless acceleration. Play the long game. So that's cause number 1, training load errors. I, of course, could go on about different training load errors, but the long and short of it is, don't do too much too soon. Consider the adaptation cycles and how your body needs to recover. And consider the context. Stay patient, stay consistent, and avoid reckless acceleration. Cause number 2 then. This is one that actually a lot of people tend to argue about. People tend to disagree on all sorts of different cues and prompts for this. But the second most common cause of running injuries is related to biomechanical issues and weakness. Biomechanical issues and weakness. I like to think of injuries as a sign of weakness, but not in the way that you may have heard that. It's an indicator. It's a sign that there is weakness somewhere. It's information. Your running injury is information. And so when you think of your running injury, sometimes I think of this to myself. This might not resonate with you. But when I have a running injury of some kind, an overuse injury, I see it as a sign of weakness. Not in the traditional sense, or in the sense that you might know, but in the literal sense that it is a sign of weakness somewhere in the body. You might have a weak glute or hip control, and therefore that leads to poor control at the knee, which causes runner's knee. You might have like calf or ankle weakness, which can cause some sort of Achilles tendinopathy, or maybe even plantar fasciitis. You might have, just generally weak muscles in the foot. You might be overstriding or lacking control in your stride and causing higher impact forces on each stride. You might have mobility limitations. You might have tight hips or tight ankles, restricting your efficient movement. The body is like a chain. And quite often, very often, injuries appear downstream from the real issue. Let me say that again. Quite often, your injury appears downstream from the actual issue itself, from the cause. I once had an issue with my knee, and my physiotherapist identified that I was collapsing my knee inward. This was due to a weak glute. I was surprised. I had a knee issue. How could it be not the knee? No, it was related to my glute. As you fatigue, as you run and you fatigue, your form breaks down. The stronger and more resilient you are, the longer your good form will last. Neuromuscular coordination will be more efficient, and you'll ensure that you can run in the most efficient way. If you have some sort of weakness, it might be that you're not even that weak in that area, but over a 30k run, a 40k run, you start to break down your form, and that could cause an injury. Your body takes the path of least resistance. If you're weak in a certain area and you're trying to use that area, you're trying to activate that certain muscle. Let's say I was weak in my glute. In order to run with good form and keep my knees straight, I needed to activate that glute. But when that glute got fatigued and, wasn't strong enough, or even before it was getting fatigued and it just simply wasn't strong enough, my body wanted to take the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance was to collapse the knee inward. Collapsing the knee inward didn't activate my glutes as much, and that made it easier for the glute, which was weak. And that downstream caused an injury in my knee. Now, this is just one of many examples, but it's important to recognize that your body is like a chain. An injury is can be a sign of a weakness somewhere else. And you should take it as an opportunity to identify where that weakness is. Go to a physio. They are the medical professional that will work with you to do what they can to identify the cause of the injury. Once they feel like they have some sort of hypothesis on what the cause is, they will give you strength exercises to strengthen where that weakness is, to get you back up to that baseline. Running is like self-knowledge. I talk a lot about tuning into how you feel. The more you run, the more you learn about your body. And so often I find it frustrating, and I'm victim to this as well. But so often runners are too obsessed with the data. They're too obsessed with whether they're in the right zone, whether they're running the right pace, and they forget to take the opportunity that they have to tune into their body, to know what it feels like to run with good form, to know what it feels like to start fatiguing in certain areas before other areas, to identify imbalance with your running. Tune into how you feel. Running is like self-knowledge. The body whispers before it screams. Okay, the third and final cause that I want to go over very quickly is footwear and surfaces. Now, the reason I want to go over this very quickly is because really there's no perfect solution for everyone. I believe there are certain characteristics of certain shoes that I would highly recommend. I know, for example, that squishing your toes and your foot into a really tight cast can be detrimental for your foot health, for the muscles in your feet. But the general rule here is to really try as many different types of shoes as you can over the course of your running career, as it were. You will need to swap out shoes, and so you need to test. You need to try different shoes. Because it's not all about the shoes, okay? That's why this is the third of 3. It's not all about the shoes and the surface you're running on. But it does have an impact. You know, of course, strength training and biomechanics and correct training load, that's all super important. But if you speak to someone who has experienced the wrong shoe for them and the right shoe for them, you will know that it makes a world of difference. For me, I'm a big fan of Innovate's shoes. This is a side note. I know they're sponsoring the podcast, but this is a side note. And I'm a big fan of theirs because they allow my feet to splay. They don't have a massive drop. They're nimble. They have great grip. And they just feel good on my feet. They hug my foot. They don't slip at the heel. And, you know, I can rely on the fact that many people say the same. So I would recommend that you try them. But no shoe is going to be perfect for everyone. And your shoes, they don't fix your form, but they do influence loading patterns. And the most crucial thing that I want to emphasize here is that sudden changes, so if you're jumping from a maximalist shoe to a minimalist shoe, you are very likely, very likely, if you suddenly jump to a minimal shoe, to overwork something, maybe your Achilles or your calf, or get some sort of injury. I've seen this happen. Even just moving from a 10mm drop to a 4mm drop, it will affect your gait, it will affect what muscles are being worked, so you need to consider this. And also I see a lot when people move from regular shoes, suddenly they go to carbon plated shoes and they love how they feel, and then they do all their running in carbon plated shoes, or a lot of it anyway, all their speed workouts in carbon plated shoes, and all of a sudden they're running into injuries. This is a sudden change in footwear that will affect how your body reacts to what you're putting through it. And then also repetitive stress on the same surface. This is quite common amongst road runners, just pounding the pavements. You might go into your running, you've ramped too quickly, you haven't tuned in with your body, so you don't know where there are weaknesses, and you're just pounding the pavements with a shoe that's not right for you. You'll get injured. Generally, when it comes to shoes, my philosophy is that we shouldn't rely on the shoe to do the work. The shoe is a tool. It can assist. But we shouldn't rely on the shoe to prevent injuries, for example. In the same way that I, as a flat-footed runner, do not use insoles. I don't want the arch support. I want to strengthen my arch. I don't want the stabilizers. I want to learn to ride. Despite my impairment, having flat feet, it may be more of a challenge. I have had injuries because of it. But despite that, I am looking to strengthen my arch so that I can become more resilient. If I'm relying on my shoe if I'm relying on arch support and extra foam and all this stuff, what needs to be strong just gets weaker. So, they're the three that I chose to talk about today. Training load errors, biomechanical issues and weakness, and footwear and surface. A little bonus cause for you, though, is quite a common one. I couldn't not say it. But the single strongest predictor of a future injury is a history of injury. The single strongest predictor of a future injury is a history of injury. If you've already had knee pain and you manage to sort it out somehow, it is highly likely that you will get that injury again. If you're not intentional about fixing your injury, about working hard to make where is weak strong, identifying the cause, doing something about it, if you don't stay consistent on that and work hard to ensure you're preventing future repeating injuries, it will repeat. It will come back. So, past injuries are teachers. They're lessons. If you don't adjust, history repeats itself. So, stay disciplined. Don't ramp too quickly. Think about your biomechanics. Think about how your body is traveling over the ground, where improvements can be made, where there are weaknesses. Think about the footwear you're wearing. Does it feel good to you? Does it work well? Get your gait assessed at a shop. It's not the perfect answer, but it's a start. And think about the injuries you're having or you have had, and do not get lazy about them. It's unlikely you've completely fixed it. Injuries aren't random. They're signals to adjust. Injury prevention is about being patient, building strength, and listening to your body. Okay. Now, we're going to move on to our RunBiz segment. This week, we have Ed Vickers of Sums. It was a pleasure to speak to him. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, I do say at the beginning of this segment that we haven't had one for a while, which is a lie, because we had one last week. But regardless, it's been a while since we did a RunBiz segment, and the idea behind the RunBiz segment of the podcast is that it's an occasional feature on That's Runnable where we spotlight the businesses shaping the world of running, from innovative startups to established brands doing something different. This segment is all about showcasing the gear, nutrition, technology, and services that runners might find interesting. I'll chat with founders, team members, and industry insiders, not for a sales pitch, but for a real conversation about what they're building, why it matters, and how it fits into the running world. Whether it's a niche brand with a cult following or a fresh idea making waves, RunBiz is here to give listeners a look behind the scenes at the businesses fueling the sport. This week, I'm talking to Ed Vickers, founder of Sums, a brand that stormed into the running space with a bang, and it's done so by focusing on what Ed calls the unsung hero of every runner's kit bag: socks. But Sums isn't just about socks. They're coming into the space creatively, consciously, and with a strong focus on what so many of us value most about running: community. From design to delivery, there's a clear sense of care and thought behind what they're doing, and it's refreshing to see a brand come into the running world with such intention. You can check out their beautifully made socks at sumsclub.co.uk. I'll let the conversation speak for itself, but here's my RunBiz chat with Ed Vickers from Sums. Where are you today? Are you at home?
No. I'm in the office. down in
Okay.
Brixton. The irony of talking about trail running from one of the most urban places in Europe is not lost on us. But we do spend most of our weekends out and about in wooded areas, mountainous areas.
Nice.
Yeah,
And when you
but
say we, how many people have you got in the
we're
office?
only four. We've got our fourth joining, so we're a really small but mighty team so far. 20 months in, but yeah, looking to try and add the right people into the team at the right time. But taking our time to do it. Obviously, people are such a big part of like this whole thing. This whole thing will live and die by the quality of the team and their ability to execute in their various areas in the business. So yeah, trying to do
Yeah,
it
man.
slowly but right.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy to think you're just four because I feel like, and I remember when we first had a chat and you said how young the business was. I was like, really? I feel like I've seen sums everywhere. I feel like I'm seeing sums on loads of people's ankles.
Really? Well, that's nice. I think, yeah, we're only 20 months in. So, yeah, 20 months ago, we turned the lights on in November 23 for December launch. And we were just a website and yeah, and a dream and some socks. But we've been going ever since then. And yeah, it's really just been starting from the ground up. Pardon the pun. But we've basically, yeah, just been trying to deliver on making the best pair of socks we can, getting out there, getting feedback. Obviously, our opinion on our product is absolutely irrelevant. It's about the opinions of people who are putting miles through them, who are out on the mountains, who are doing big trail runs in our product and getting objective feedback that just continuously feeds into our R&D for the next round. So every time we place an order with our factory, the sock changes. So literally
Yeah,
every time
really.
we top up the order, like there's a small, minute construction change or yarn change or anything like that. So yeah, it's been good.
Nice
It's been a
man.
good little journey.
When you're referring to we as well, is it a founding team of one or two?
Yeah, me and my Todd to start with, and then I hired George and Will who have joined. George leads on all things like digital, um, anything to do with electricity and Wi-Fi and being online. He looks after, and then all the digital
Nice.
marketing aspects as well. And then Will is the kind of out there at events, doing partnerships, meeting, spreading the love, as well as trying to get the product on feet as well. So. Yeah, and then we've got Luke who's joining as a kind of product developer, helping us kind of take our product process to the next level, trying to think about how do we make an even better pair of socks,
Mm.
both in its kind of performance, but also sustainability. How do we marry those two things? They've often been in a bit of a battle with each other, and it's like that's a big nut to crack for us with socks, particularly because socks have been historically and traditionally sort of made out of virgin polyesters, and put a little hole in that, and that's on landfill for the rest of eternity. So yeah, we're
Mm.
trying to figure out what it looks like to not compromise performance, but also be as sustainable as we can.
And was that the initial dream? You said back 20 months ago, or not even, you launched a website and all you had was a dream. What was that dream? Was it, we want to make the best socks in the world sustainably? What really was the dream in your head?
Yeah, I think it's way before that actually. I grew up watching my old man run around marathons like a complete lunatic and, was always inspired by what he did and the role that running had in his life. And therefore my life running after him. And then, yeah, I always kind of had this pipe dream with him that we'd run the London Marathon together. He's done numerous marathons and we did that before lockdown. And it was just like the best day of our lives. We were raising money for charity. We were running as a group. The euphoria that we experienced on that day was just like unparalleled. And I think I've always had this sense that like there's just this deep connection and deep river within running and its culture of like goodwill and like camaraderie, charity, sustainability. Like there's just so much goodness there. And I think I've always aspired. It was more of on a brand level, actually, the dream.
Mm.
It's like
Okay.
where is that brand in the space that I personally really connect to on a like on that goodwill level, the Patagonia of the running world, like had like activism, amazing product and uh community, like as well as say like an amazing product. So I've always sort of dreamt up like what that brand could look like and stand for. And socks was one of these really interesting first steps for us, because I kind of felt like socks was the unsung hero of the runner's kit bag. You know, a lot of attention on footwear and apparel, quite rightly, really important products, but socks was kind of the afterthought, in my opinion, for a lot of brands. So I thought, well, why don't we go full beans on one product and see if we can deliver as well as we can, both on its performance, sustainability, and its social impact, and its ability to kind of gather and herd a bunch of runners around this kind of one product, and build that community. Yeah, that was the initial intention. I guess it was just a massive experiment to start with, and it still is, you know, like, can we deliver well on one product? Running is an incredibly busy category. There's a million and one brands out there. Everyone's had years and years of R&D, investment, brand building, and the imposter syndrome, I think, is like an all-time high, like coming into the space. And so, yeah, Socks was like, okay, let's commit to this one small product, see where we can take it, and then go from there. So that's what we've done.
I love it, man. And I've been curious for a while. Where did the name come from? Sums Club. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I suppose it comes back to this idea of the goodwill in the sport. And I was interested to be like, you know, runners love fundraising for charity. It's a big part of the sport. It's like a big part of, especially marathon running. But, you know, it's usually runners raise a lot of money individually, very infrequently, on like a big race that they do or whatever. I thought, well, could we use our socks to make it possible where a runner could raise a very small micro amount of money on every run that they go on as a community? And so Sums is kind of a little nod to this idea of like this collective contribution across a large amount of runners who are chipping into this pot. But with every run that they go on, we will pledge a certain amount of money to charity, which at the end of every month goes to a charity. And we work with the Outrunners, who are amazing youth running charity in East London. They get kids running around and experiencing all the benefits of running that we know and love. I suppose it kind of is about running being an unsolo sport ultimately, and this idea that we all can all come together and enjoy the sport and contribute back, helping runners help runners in that way.
I love that, man. Yeah, I mean, the obvious questions that people listening are probably thinking is, okay, we've got Ed on who's got a sock brand. Like, what's the difference? And I guess you alluded to it there. You know, you're really investing time and energy and a structure into campaigns, but also a model that makes sense and actually raises.
Sure.
What are the what are the like obvious and key differences? If someone says, okay, it's a sock brand, and they're very cynical, and they're just like, what's the difference? What makes your socks better or unique or whatever? What are the sort of key things that you'd list to someone?
Yeah, I mean, if you're cynical, then welcome to the team. I mean, we are super cynical about any brands talking about sort of raising money for charity or like sustainability or anything like that. Like, ultimately, can you make a product that can deliver and look after you, that you'd bet your race day on, basically after a hard 16-week training block? Would you wear our socks at the start line? Yes or no? And so that's this aspiration, is that we make the best product possible, and everything else that we do that can give back and gets the community together is secondary to that, in all honesty. So yeah, I mean, ultimately it comes down to working with great yarns. We've done the tour of like every sort of yarn that we can possibly make with, and we've hell bent on trying to make it a recycled yarn over a virgin yarn, and we use this kind of recycled nylon blend. And the artistry of sock making ultimately comes down to trying to strike the right balance. It's not similar to cooking with ingredients. You have to get the right balance of the yarn mix, how tight you making the sock, the compression factor, the cushioning and support factor. And it's just these micro adjustments basically across the sock that we're trying to strike the balance of making a really good long distance running socks that's anti-blister. So it's got targeted cushioning in the right areas of the foot, but it's not too thick, and it's not too hot on foot, but it can get rid of lots of moisture. Basically a pair of socks that you don't really think about once you put them on, and you're thinking about the run and where you are and enjoying the run rather than thinking about your feet. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and you're pretty feedback heavy. I know you've done some work with Tom Evans. He has a nice sock, and I have to before I digress too much into how much I love the design of these socks, how was working with Tom Evans?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I couldn't, it was definitely a pinch me moment that we even had the chance to, in our first full year of operating as a business, that we could work with
Yeah.
one of the best trail runners in the world. The reason we worked with Tom and wanted to work with Tom is because he gives it to you straight. He's not going to like, pat you on the back and say, well done. And, this sock was designed for him for UTMB for his big race last year. And if there's one person who's putting in miles in his training, it's Tom. And so we basically just brought him in on the process. We sent him iterations and we had this mental spreadsheet, which like listed out 20 different features of the sock, like its tightness, its fit, its like robustness, its washability, its like cushioning, and he would just grade them and just give us these awful scores at the beginning about how bad they were and how they needed to change. And we went on this journey basically together where he basically kept piling in miles through them, kept feeding back, and we got to a really, really good place that we were really happy with. So, it allowed us to probably speed up, 5 years worth of R&D in the space of 7 months, basically working with him. And yeah, he was wearing our socks and stuff, which was great.
Mad. And the actual design of the socks as well, like you go on the website and I should have the website up here so I can kind of call them out, but
yeah.
I just love the design of them. Like, who is responsible for how these socks look? I love them.
Yeah.
They're so fun.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I suppose, it comes back to this idea that socks have been the afterthought for too long now. And I think, again, coming back to this idea of striking balance, we want them to be interesting and nicely designed and have a decent aesthetic to them, but not also too garish and like wacky or like trying to, scream for attention, which is where running socks have been historically, in my opinion. So yeah, I suppose there's also this idea that we're trying to create designs that is widely encompassing. So, our community are a big, wide, lots of different runners, road runners, trail runners, different ages, stages, and people like different designs. And obviously people work backwards from the shoe they bought as well. So yeah, we tried our best in the kind of design aesthetic of them to like make sure we can cater to a wide audience, but also have a bit of fun as well.
Yeah. They're beautiful, man. Right, where are you going then? Where's the business going? I know that you have been trying to master and perfect the sock, and I don't think you're going to stop doing that. But have you got grand plans to sort of go beyond the sock, or have you got any interesting new types of socks coming out?
Yeah, we've got big dreams and schemes for broadening the product category. I think what people love and the feedback we've got, people love the brand. People love what we stand for and the sentiments that drive us, and have all, we constantly are getting asked like, what's next? And we're trying to be as patient and slow as possible to make sure that we're doing things well and considered. I think we can all agree the last thing the world needs is just more run kit for the sake of run kit. There's loads of stuff out there and good stuff, bad stuff, but we want to have a real reason why we're bringing a new product to market beyond just trying to build a business. Yeah, I mean, we're starting from the ground up. So we really are as today, we're launching our longer compression sock, which has been a big project for us. We're looking into merino. We really want to work with more merino wool. So we've got that coming in a few months on the sock front. And depending on how those go, and if we can crack those and get great feedback on them, we kind of want to earn the right to diversify our product category. And we will only go as fast as the feedback we get. And in terms of that process. So, but yeah, I mean, we have absolute aspirations to be a head to toe trail running specific brand going forwards. We love all runners. We've been in the marathon space. We work with lots of different people in different running categories, but I think trail for us specifically, like from a culture perspective and from a sort of storytelling perspective and the sort of athletes that we personally resonate with and want to support with our kit and our brands, like trail is just one of these sports for us that we really connect with. We want to kind of like really zero in on that type of athlete and in that world and really tailor our products for the trail. So really yeah, I've been elusive on what we're developing, but there's some other bits in the oven for sure.
Yeah, man. No, I really appreciate your approach to going in with one product, having a purpose to that product, and not just sort of going, oh, do you know what? Let's make t-shirts now, and let's make jackets, and let's make shorts, and let's just like, think of new stuff to design and make and create and sell and for people to consume. Because yes, it is a saturated space. And as a consumer, as a runner, I obviously love my kit. I love it. It's fun. I like getting new stuff. And actually, I remember when I was a broke runner, one of the things I used to get excited about buying new was new socks, because they were the thing that I could afford, because I couldn't afford new shoes was a rarity, and something like socks was like, okay, that's quite fun actually, and it makes a big difference in my day when I put a fresh pair of socks on.
For sure.
But I really appreciate the kind of approach you have, and for me, I think in the trail and road running space, no matter what kind of you prefer, it's still always going to be an expression of what you want to kind of communicate through the brands you wear. And for me, Sums is a brand that actually stands for something and is thinking carefully about how they expand and how they actually make products in the world. We can all say, oh, we don't need another running brand or whatever. Or we could step in and say, actually, we're going to step in and do things differently because we don't think that brands currently are doing it the right way. And so I really appreciate that about Sums and your mission. And it's certainly a brand that I feel like proud to wear. So no matter what you're making, I think people should resonate with what you're trying to do. And I do think you're kind of representing people who kind of do care a bit about having some sort of purpose and
Thanks, man.
doing it in the right way.
That's generous of you. And I think, realistically, we're on a complete journey and getting a huge amount of stuff wrong as we are getting it right. Really young. And the real hope is basically to build this cohort of runners that can feed into what we're doing and feel a sense of ownership of building this brand with us. And, on that product side, the real aspiration is that we will have a community that we can trial examples with, trial like new products with, and get that feedback and really build products for specific people rather than just thinking, let's just bang out a load of shorts and tees for the sake of it. And we're trying to figure out what that looks like. Like, what does it look like to bring in, like systems that allow people to contribute to the R&D process, but it also helps steer where we want to go as a brand. Like, I think we've got like a lot of clear values about what we care for and what we're about and what we believe about our sport, and particularly around this kind of like running as a team sport. And we believe that like running is better when we run together, but how that manifests and how that expresses itself as we go, we're all ears from our community, basically, of what that could look like. So yeah, it's exciting.
Amazing, man. Okay, I have one final question for you, which is like something I'm really interested in as someone interested in startups and new business and founders and entrepreneurialism. What's been, do you think, the biggest lesson you've learned during the last 2-year project that you've been on as a founder?
Biggest lesson I've learned, I mean, it's nothing particularly novel or new, but basically that the founder is almost irrelevant. I think it is always comes down to finding great people who are better at doing their thing than you think you are at doing it their thing. So, I've been really lucky with the people who have joined, and they are absolute rock stars, and I love working with them, and they kick ass in their like particular fields. And basically my job is to try and find great people and get out of the way. That's, I think, basically what I'm trying to do. And steer the ship and say, this is where we want to go, but how we get there, and the way we get there, hold that lightly, I think, and bring people in on it. So yeah, I think that's kind of would be my one point. I think I think the biggest risk to this whole endeavor is my ego. So having a real strong conversation with my ego every morning to try and make sure he's kind of tamed and gets out of the way of other people's abilities and dreams and visions for what the brand can be as well. It's a big thing. So yeah, that would be it.
Amazing, man. Thanks, Ed. I appreciate you coming on. I really believe you're building something good. And I actually fell asleep with Sums on my feet last night and didn't even notice.
Oh, good.
But yeah, thanks for coming on, man. It's been good to talk and learn a little bit more about Sums and what you're after.
Cheers, Tommy.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Ed from Sums. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you go and check out sumsclub.co.uk and check out what they've got on offer. You'll see what I was on about when I was speaking about their great design. They're beautiful socks. They're my favourite socks in my drawer when I go out for a run. And I really believe in what Ed is building and the team there are putting together. I think they have the right intentions. They're thinking in the right way. And they are a net positive for the running space. We'll be back with another RunBiz episode pretty soon. I'm going to be trying to do a few more of these, so hopefully we can have some more banked up and we can add them into the solo episodes so you can get introduced to brands that I love, that are fascinating me, and I get the privilege to speak to the founder or speak to a representative from the business. If you have any suggestions of any run businesses that you think should come on and talk about why they exist and what they're building, then just drop me an email, tommy@that'srunnable.com, and we can see if we can sort that out. The last thing I want to mention is, of course, the coaching hub. That's Runnable's coaching hub is my coaching platform. It's designed for people who want to feel confident in the gym and become a durable runner, and not just think of their strength training as a secondary thing, but something that is fundamental to their week's training. There are people in there training for mountain ultras of up to 100 miles, and there are people in there just training for their first half marathon. The programs are built in a way to fit around your schedule, and I want you to feel empowered to have that schedule in front of you, have access to talk to me with form feedback or advice or any sort of chat you want. The community is growing stronger and I'm loving seeing that. If you want to join, there's a new intake on the first Monday of every month. So go to the show notes and check that out. And lastly, truly lastly, if you've come this far and if you've enjoyed the episode, it really does the podcast favors if you rate the podcast. So just get your phone out, tap the rate button on whatever platform you're listening to it on, and drop us a 5-star rating or whatever rating you think is deserved. Okay, that's all I can ask of you. Thanks for joining. As always, run the runnable. Keep showing up for yourself. And I'll see you next time.